Good morning and welcome to our English lesson today. And in our lesson today, we are going to talk of sentences with similar meaning. In our previous lesson, we talked about antonyms or words opposite in meaning by use of what? A prefix. And say prefixes are words that are put before a word, a group of letters that are put before a word. Once they are put before a word, they change its meaning. Legible, illegible, possible, impossible, polite, impolite. So, and there's also use of non. You can say governmental, non-governmental. So we talked of prefixes and how we can use these prefixes to come up with the opposites of what? Opposites of words. But I said a word can have a prefix to form its opposite, but a word can also have just an opposite. For example, if you are not kind, you are cruel. But the kind can also be unkind. The opposite of kind can also be what? Unkind. A word can have an opposite that is not formed by a prefix, and it can have an opposite of a word by use of a prefix. So you just look at the answers, and then you are going to determine which one you are going to come up with. You look at the answer choices you've been given, and then you are going to determine which answer to come up with. So in this lesson, sentences with similar meaning, if you check KCP questions or these KCP question papers, you realize that nearly each exam they are going to ask you for a sentence. They give a question or they give a sentence, and then they ask you give a sentence that means the same. Now, give a sentence that means the same, or give a sentence that is similar to the one that you've been given, And you realize that when they're asking for sentences that are similar to the ones that we have been given, we have the passive and active voice. We have the direct and indirect speech. If that sentence, those sentences that you've been given, and they want you to give sentences that mean the same, lie under passive and active voice. They may be lie in the direct and indirect speech. And we can also call the indirect speech reported speech. It is also called the reported speech. You can call it the reported speech. And because most people tend to confuse it, you can say direct to reported speech, or maybe you've been given a reported speech and they want you to give it in the direct speech. Then you have correlatives, then you have conditional sentences. Now, when we talk of passive and active voice, for example, number one, we are going to talk of passive and active voice. How you change changes from the active to passive voice, or from the passive and active voice, entirely depends on tenses. And we've talked of passive and active voice in one of our lessons, like maybe not even just one, maybe 2 or 3 of our lessons. Now, what does that mean? You as a learner, you should know when to change an active sentence to a passive sentence, or you should know what is an active sentence. An active sentence is when the focus of the sentence is on the doer of the action. But when you come to the passive sentence, it is when the focus of that sentence is on the receiver of the action. Now, changing sentences from the active to passive voice entirely depends on tenses. If for you as a learner to be in position to give a sentence that means the same, meaning these sentences are similar, only certain things have changed, you must be able to differentiate, or you must be able to know a sentence in the active voice in the present tense changes to a sentence in what? In the past tense. A present in the present simple tense, present in the past simple tense changes to what? In the passive voice. And we have tenses. We say tenses are divided into 3. Number one, we have the present. We have the present tense. We have the present tense. And then we have the past tense. We have the past tense. We have the past tense. And then we have the future tense. Then we have the future tense. Now, you have the present tense, you have the past tense, then you have the future tense. Each tense is further subdivided into 4 groups. So you have what we call the simple. You have what we call the continuous. You have what we call the perfect. And then you have what we call the perfect continuous. You have the perfect, and then you have the perfect what? The perfect continuous. Now, you go to each tense, and then from each tense, you are going to come up the present simple tense, we are going to come up with the present continuous tense. You're going to come up with the present perfect tense, and then you're going to come up with the present perfect continuous tense. Present perfect continuous tense. The same applies to the past tense, and the same applies to the future tense. The same applies to the future tense. Why is it important? You should know how we form a present tense. How do you form a present tense? We've talked about tenses. How do I form a present tense? A present tense of a sentence or the present simple tense is when a tense is, or the past present continuous tense. When do we have the present continuous tense formed by a present? The present continuous tense is formed by is or am or are plus a present past participle tense. A present participle tense. If somebody says the present participle is simply the ing form of a verb, ing form of a verb. So you come to the active and passive voice. Active, and you have the passive voice. Maybe somebody has said, we eat bananas. We eat bananas. We eat bananas. This sentence is in the present, the simple tense, in the present simple tense. Now, if we eat bananas, in my active, in my passive, I'm going to say, bananas are eaten. Bananas are eaten by bananas are eaten by us. Now, we changes to us. And then I've said bananas are, I'm coming up with are. So if you want to come up with the passive voice of the present simple tense, it is either going to take, it forms its passive by use of is or are plus a verb in the past participle. You simply go back to your notes and check this. Because when it comes to these questions, sentences with similar meaning, they are going to give you a sentence, and you like it or not, they are going to ask you to give a sentence that means the same. Now look at my sentence. We eat bananas. We eat bananas. This sentence is similar in meaning with my sentence 2. This is my sentence 1. This is my sentence 2. They are simply going to say we eat bananas. Bananas are eaten by us. Or we eat, or she eats, or she eats banana. She eats a banana. She eats a banana. She is the past, the third person singular. It is the present tense. You are going to say a banana is eaten. A banana is eaten. Why? Because this banana is in the present tense. Because this banana is in singular. Once the sentence is in singular, it takes is. Once the sentence, the receiver of the action or the object receiving the action is in plural, it takes what? It takes are. Now you have the continuous tense. Let's say, for example, the present continuous tense. How do we form the present tense, continuous tense? By use of am or is plus ia plus ing, or are. By use of are, am, is, and ing. For example, we are. For example, I can say we are eating. We are eating mangoes. We are eating what? Mangoes. If you want to form the passive voice of the present continuous tense, your sentence is going to read, mangoes, mangoes are being, mangoes are being eaten, mangoes are being eaten. Now, what does that tell you? You form the passive voice of a present continuous tense by use of is or are plus being plus a past participle. So mangoes are being eaten, ing, then you go to the being with also an ia and ing. The same applies to the past tense, and the same applies to the future tense. Amina was eating a mango. A mango was being eaten by Amina. That is the present continuous tense. Then we have the perfect tense, where the present perfect tense is formed by has or have plus a past participle. Whereas when you have, for example, let's talk the present perfect tense. Present perfect tense is formed by has for singular and have plus a past plus a verb in its past participle. For example, she has eaten a banana. You want to form that in the passive, you're going to say a banana has been eaten by her. She has eaten a banana has been eaten by her. What am I trying to say? For you to be in a position to change the passive voice, the active voice, to the passive voice, you must be in a position, or you must know the the tenses. There is no way, there is no shortcut to this. Do you know the tenses? Do you know when to change the sentence from the passive to the active? The active. The same applies to direct and indirect speech. The same applies to direct and indirect speech. Now, you realize that when you have the direct speech, when you're having the direct speech, for you to change a sentence from the direct speech to the reported speech, or for you to change a sentence from the reported speech to the direct speech, it entirely depends on tenses. Do you know the tenses? Do you know how to change a sentence from the direct speech, present tense, to the indirect speech, Or what does a present simple tense? For example, let's talk of direct and reported or indirect speech. Direct and indirect speech. Direct and indirect speech. Direct and indirect speech. Why do we say a sentence in the direct speech? A sentence is in the direct speech when the exact words spoken by a speaker are quoted using what? Quotation marks. But in the indirect speech, there is no use of quotation marks. We also call them inverted commas. We also call them speech marks. Now, the present simple tense changes to the past simple tense. Present simple tense, for example, we have the present simple tense. Present simple tense changes to the past simple tense. You realize that when you have to change a sentence from the direct speech to the indirect speech, it's very different from when you have to change a sentence from the active voice to the passive voice. Because in the active voice, when it is present tense, it remains present up to the end. But when you come to the direct and indirect speech, the present tense changes to the past tense. The past tense changes to the perfect tense. The perfect changes to the perfect continuous tense. Now, like tenses shift from present to the past, from the past to the perfect, from the past to the perfect. It is different. That's why most learners are going to get confused when it comes to direct speech and active and passive voice. Direct and indirect speech and active and passive voice. And most of you have seen these questions when it comes to these questions in the exam, especially in KCP. You get KCP questions from question 16 to 25. You won't lack a question where they're asking you to give a sentence that means the same. Now, direct speech present simple tense changes to the past simple tense. For example, we sing aloud. For example, we are going to say, we sing aloud. We sing what? Aloud. Sing. How do you know the sentence is the present tense? By simply checking the verb. Is the verb in the present? Is the verb in the past? So we sing aloud. Now, you realize that some pronouns and certain words in the direct speech they change when we get them to the indirect speech, when we get them in the direct speech. And I gave out notes. I gave out examples of these words. For example, we sing, we changes to they. For example, here the sentence is going to say, they sang aloud. We changes to they, sing changes to sang. I've simply changed my sentence from the present simple tense to the past simple tense. You go to the present continuous tense. Said each tense is divided into 4. And tenses are key, especially when it comes to the direct and what? The direct and indirect speech. Passive and active voice. There is no way in hell you are going to change these sentences from the direct or from the active voice to the passive voice if you don't know tenses. There is no way you are going to change this sentence from the direct speech to the indirect if you don't know tenses. And you realize that some sentences are going to sound okay, like they are the answers, when in real sense they are wrong because the tense you used is not correct. Most learners cannot change sentences from the direct speech to the indirect. That's for sure. Or maybe someone knows they think they know, when in real sense they don't. There is no way you are going to change a sentence from the direct speech to the indirect, or from the active to the passive, if you have not done what? If you have not mastered the tenses. What do I mean? Go back and read your notes on tenses. That's the only way you are going to be in a position to change these sentences. The present continuous tense, we said, how do we form the present continuous tense? Now, tenses, we bring tenses in. Present continuous tense is formed by use of is, or by use of are, or by use of am, for the past person plus a present participle tense. And what is a present participle tense? It's simply the ing form of a verb. Ing form of a verb. For example, we are singing. We are singing. Now, this is the present tense. And then we said we changes to they. The present simple present continuous tense changes to the past continuous tense. How do you form the past continuous tense? By use of was or were plus a present participle tense. You see, if you don't know the tenses, there is no way you are going to change that sentence. For example, we are singing. We are singing. R is plural, which means this sentence is the plural. So you are going to say they were singing. Present continuous changes to the past continuous. We are singing. Now we are singing. In the reported speech, it is going to be to say they were singing. They were what? They were singing. In short, the simplest way to change sentences from the direct speech to the indirect, all I want you to note is the present tense changes to the past. The present tense changes to the past tense. The past tense changes to the what? Past tense changes to the perfect tense. The perfect tense. The perfect tense changes to the perfect what? The past continuous changes to the past perfect continuous. The past perfect continuous changes to the past perfect continuous. Like I've given out this notes, you simply check present changes to the past. The past changes to the perfect. You check this. If you go back to your notes on tenses, then you are going to be in a position to know. As long as you know a certain tense is formed by what. Like if somebody says they are eating bananas, you know that your sentence is in the present continuous tense. She has eaten a banana. You know that your sentence is in the present perfect continuous. It's in the present perfect tense. If you are in a position to identify that, then trust me, if you are in a position to identify that, then you are in a position, a very great position, to change your sentences from the direct and indirect speech. Or they can give you the reported speech and they want you to change to the direct speech. You entirely depend on tense and some pronouns and some words. For example, we have today. Today is going to be that day in the reported speech. Now is going to be the then. Yesterday is going to be the previous day. Tomorrow is going to be the following or the next day. Some words change, but definitely pronouns change. Totally change from the direct speech to the indirect speech The same way to active and passive voice. They entirely depend on tenses and tenses. What you have to do is, and you've seen these questions, questions 16 to 25. You can't lack this question. They give you a sentence, then they say give a sentence that means the same. And that sentence might be one, punctuation. The number one, it can be the passive and active voice, or it can be the direct and indirect speech. Why are these sentences nearly similar? Because they all depend on tense. They all depend on tenses. As a learner, do you know tenses? Do you know how you can change the sentence from the passive to the active? Basing on tenses, because there is no shortcut here. You either know the tenses or you don't know the tenses. You have the direct and indirect speech. From the direct speech to the indirect entirely depends on tenses. Or sometimes they ask you, they give you a reported speech and they want you to write a direct speech. Sometimes they give you a passive voice, they want you to write in active, or they'll give you an active sentence, they want you to write the passive sentence. I hope that you go back to your notes and make sure that you have and make sure that you know this, or make sure that you've mastered how to change the sentences from the direct speech to reported speech, and how to change sentences from the active and passive voice. Because you like it or not, when the exam comes, question 16 to question 25, you're going to get one question. It doesn't matter this question is in what, or in which that question is lying where under this lesson. Either it is in the passive and active voice, either it's in the direct and indirect speech, or either it lies under what? Under conditional sentences, or maybe it is going to lie under conditional what? Conditional sentences. I remember having taught conditional sentences I remember having taught conditional sentences. And when I talked of conditional sentences, I talked of the likely, the unlikely, and then the probable condition, the probable condition. When I come back for my lesson when I come back for our next lesson, I'm going to take off conditional sentences, and not just how, but how we are going to. You have these conditional sentences, and if you're asked to give a sentence that means the same, how you are going to change them to the sentences that mean the same, to the sentences that mean the same. Go back to your notes kindly, especially direct and indirect speech, active and passive voice, tenses, and make sure you identify the tenses and how to change the words from the direct speech to the indirect. Have a good day.